Cosmic here, welcome back to the channel, and today we have another Union Arena gameplay video, this time featuring, or take two featuring, Blue Bomber versus Yellow Bleach. And if the last video was a great showcase of how Blue Bomber can really capitalize on the lower BP threshold decks, like we saw in the Phantom Troop, and really getting the 3K swings in power, well, what happens when they have a lot of 4Ks instead, right? This is one of the weaknesses of the deck. If you don't have Bara, it can be very difficult to interact with your board in a meaningful way. So this video is a great showcase of a more, back and forth even match, and again showing the spot of where Bomber can somewhat struggle a little bit. And also because I just want to try to get some other decks and gameplay videos out there. I've gotten a lot of requests actually for Blue Bomber, but this will be the last Blue Bomber gameplay related thing on the channel, at least until after JJK, and we will come back to it a little bit later, but I do want to showcase some of the other decks. So opening turns, getting out of the way here, getting our energy line set up, and the one get through is actually really important in this deck as well, and just kind of the overall filtering that we're going to get, being able to see what's on top or not, see if we can line up the risky dice, or just allowing this to hit other cards on top and then draw into them, right? Make sure that our risky dice is hitting. This is a really important sequencing here too, because he did play the Lloyd, which loses 1000 BP if it doesn't block something that is rated. So risky dice being able to buff the gun allows us to get in that extra chip damage, and a lot of the Bomber deck really rotates around how much value you can get out of a risky dice over the course of a game. So something to definitely keep in mind is that sometimes you will just, have to risk it. Sometimes you do just need that 1k buff and have to go from there. But he does hit the watch here to get rid of our character, and he frees up ace power damage. So we see another risky dice going to hand. And this is where we really start to see, out of the Yellow Bleach deck, they do have a lot of ways to remove 3Ks. And, spoiler, when Bara himself is only a 3K, he is a prime removal target in this matchup, especially if you're playing against the Blue Bomber deck. A lot of times it can be correct just to hit their Bara. Again, we did find it here early. We have now the Holy Trinity, as it were, of having Bara, Gorinyu, and Risky Dice. And it can be very susceptible to a lot of the removal that Bleach has. Now, yes, here I do have to call myself out because I was looking for the 2 and I was rushing my plays here. So we had another raid Genthru in my hand, so we forget to reveal here. If you go frame by frame later, you do see that there's a Bisky on top, but then also later on, we discarded a Genthru because we quite literally just drew too many of them. We saw all of our rated Genthrus in this game. But again, because our opponent is going to be playing a lot of 4Ks, it's not as strong. So definitely, again, keep in mind as you're playing this deck, you do have to sequence your things properly, and it is a lot of fun once you get that kind of proficiency down. So Robert is a card I really love out of the Yellow Bleach deck, just getting the extra draw, and you so badly need the double energy. Yes, you do have to wait a little bit for it to come online, but a very good card for getting that energy and making sure that you still have a good amount in the back line. So Jugram here coming down and making us discard a card. Again, what I really love about Blue Bomber is that it does have the opportunity to have a bunch of draw in it, but unfortunately that we are going to get penalized for it because of the on-rate effect chipping away at our hand. And here we do have the Metalize, which is going to get rid of our 4K attacker. Spoiler, we see Genthru number 3 in this case that we have already in our hand. But we do have to keep the Bara online, so this is a pretty big swing turn for our opponent, and we want to make sure that we're saving an attacker on the front line as well that we can buff with risky dice. So here we know we do have a big swing back turn based on what was in our hand, and that's kind of why we took the extra point of damage here, but we want to just make sure we're maximizing the number of swings that we're going to be able to put out because of the information that we had in our hand. So Paladin's Necklace, another great call out. Again, this card can strip your own unit, which is really important because sometimes you do just need to re-raid and get more value, but otherwise it can set up things like the raid Genthru or the color Genthru, being able to remove a card from your opponent's field. Here again, another small play mistake. Always start your turn with the Gorinyu and risky dice. You always want to see that information, or in this case we have the Bara, and I just put the dice on top of my deck so I remembered and try to slow myself down here from a sequencing standpoint. Bara is also another way to look for a card. So in my opinion, the proper sequencing that you're going to want to look for a lot of the time is Gorinyu, just to see if there's anything on top and set up that way, into the Bara, which is going to reduce something, play a Genthru and then play the risky dice to draw the card, right? So that will give you the 1000 BP shrink as well as getting you to draw into whatever that card was on top. Now, here's where I made a little mistake because I was, again, trying to go in through the sequencing because I knew what I wanted to place on top, but I forgot to draw the card off the Genthru. So we had multiple ways, and again, this is just a great turn at really showcasing what Blue Bomber can do and kind of the turns that you can look forward to and how you're setting them up. But again, we did have the double Bisky here. We did have the multiple ways to stack the top of the deck. But again, I think this is all filtering that we're going to really want to see. And so what I loved about this matchup in particular, this is two big swing turns back to back that you're going to see. Now, one of the downsides of taking that extra damage from the previous turn that you're going to see is our opponent is going to have a massive double damage turn, which is going to threaten what we can push out on the following turn. So once you get to more of this late game where both decks are kind of punching at full power, it can be really scary. And here we do see him go into the 6 raid, and he has the Metalize, so technically he had enough energy. And again, this was just a fun, casual game as it were. So we want to go back and correct it. So something does get removed, he still gets to attack with his rated character, and now he has damage too. So we have to give something up here in this regard. So he was able to remove, a bunch of threats, and suddenly, we don't have much of a board, and we have to go down to 2 life, which against this matchup in particular, knowing that our opponent is going to have a lot of ways to get impact, it is quite scary to go down to 1 life. So one thing in Union Arena as well is you really need to know what does your end game look like for you versus also your opponent, and can you go down to 1 life or not in some scenarios. So here we have the Bisky who's going to get promoted, just again being a 4K blocker, able to apply some pressure. And Gordon, you just trying to look at what's on top for us. So we're going to play a Gone here, try and figure out where it's going. Clearly can't hold my cards. We're going to draw and filter one. And Gone is also a card that if you want to do more of like a blue hybrid variant, you could lean into more of the specified slot package and then go into Jaja Ken instead of the release for your special trigger. Here you see us discard the Genthru because again, at this point in late game, he has a 35 and a 4K. We don't need the extra rated Genthru. We had another one in hand. Again, unfortunately or fortunately, we drew all of them. It's just not as good in this matchup. So here we're going through, and again, a great showcase for risky dice. That 3500 attacker was not all that great, but now because we have the 1 extra buff here, we do get now a free swing, and now we're threatening 2 lethal attacks. So again, here is the interesting part of our opponent having to gamble a little bit probably on the triggers because they know they're a little bit light on energy in the back line, but they still have a way to threaten double damage and then likely into a impact if they have it. So we do see a late game Silburn coming down, and this is one where we talked about this a lot in other videos, but stages really have to have a lot of great value, in the early to mid game, like the testing gate that I've really loved in purple Zoldak family or the purple hybrid. But here, this late in the game where we're trying to trade and get those last couple points of damage in, the stages unfortunately just don't do enough. So definitely, without seeing his hand, it's a little bit harder to say, but definitely a small play mistake in terms of, thinking ahead to the next turn. Yes, they are at 1 life, so that is something to consider. We do get another discard off the Jugram, and there's the impact that we were talking about. And here's where the other small play mistake comes into play. Because they only have the 5 energy, they're probably thinking about playing another double energy character over the Silburn. They can't play that other card, which would have been able to strip away another card, because Bisky is only a 3K on your turn. So that would have been devastating if they had the 6 energy. So I'm pretty confident that this probably would have been their game if they had like the removal into double damage impact, just to make us force down more of our board, so to say. But because they didn't have the double energy to go to 6, we are able to find a line that's going to give us this last point of damage. So again, 2 really big turns just to show the power level of both Blue Bomber and Yellow Bleach, where if they can get these, high density threat turns, and yes, relying sometimes on a final trigger to make sure that you're getting the extra action points, it can be really scary. So playing the gun to the back, just going up to 3 energy. And at this point, it really comes down to we unfortunately can't figure out a way to, really get a 4th attacker here unless it's a raid. And we also can't get rid of something because they're all bigger than our rated Genthru, and we don't have a bomber. So unfortunately for us, there's no way to play around a final trigger in this scenario. When I play Union Arena, the vast majority of my games, I do try to sequence a way to beat a final trigger to line up 2 attacks, because again, nothing feels worse than losing to a final. But here we're going to see a sequences of attacks that's just going to say, hey, the Biscuit goes to 4K, so the Lloyd can't block it for free, and just realizing that we're pressuring now the rest of the field, and then the Risky Dice getting the last Genthru to 4K here as well. So the last one's not going to be a final, and that will be a win for Bomber. And once again, I did have a chance to update this. I do want to change a few things, but here is the deck list at the end. But until next time, my friends, stay safe, stay hydrated, and see ya.